They put a padlock on our dock and acted like it changed everything like a piece of wood, and some nails could erase 60 years of summers. I remember the photo on my mantle. My daughter in a red life jacket, my father with his old fishing hat, the dock a ribbon of sun across the lake, and 3 days later a new aluminum lock swung, where our family tethered the boat. That's where this whole mess started. My name's Ben Carter. I grew up 2 houses down from this dock. My family paid taxes here before the paved road even had lines. When the notice came from the Ridgeview Homeowners Association, access suspended pending review, I figured it was a paperwork hiccup, a mild annoyance. Then the emails started piling up, and the review became a parade of men with clipboards, and the parade turned into an ultimatum. No access, no explanation that made sense, and a president with a smile that never reached her eyes. Marla Hastings ran the HOA like it was her private city tuxedoed with a clipboard, hungry for authority. I won't pretend I didn't feel small at first. You stand there on your lawn, and someone in a suit tells you can't step 5 feet across your own property, and you're supposed to nod and go inside, but that's not who I am. My family's memories are glued to that dock. That's where marriage vows were toasted, where I learned to fix a motor, where my father died with his hand on the rail. That lock was not just metal. It was a bruise. The first act of this story is simple. Conflict enters the life. The protagonist refuses to yield, and things escalate. I started with letters polite, then firm. I walked into board meetings and asked blunt questions. Marla's answers were all process and posture. We have received complaints. We are following covenants. Please allow time for review. Translation: we'll hold your life hostage until you stop asking. While they practiced bureaucratic calm, the men installing the lock practiced intimidation. One of them, Jeff, I'd later learn liked to stand at the gate and stare like he was guarding a fortress. That stare felt intended to make me believe I had no right to be angry. Act 2 is the counterattack, but it isn't fireworks at first. It's elbow grease, paper trails, an ally with an old scanner, and a stubborn way of looking at things. Ellie down the street, a young paralegal who drinks black coffee and keeps every receipt, said, "Let's stop playing by their script." She introduced me to Tommy Reed, a retired county surveyor who smelled of varnish and remembered every field mark for 10 miles. Together we dug into county archives, flipping through musty plats and hand-stamped deeds. We listened to taped HOA meetings where the word access was used, then waved away, then quietly erased from minutes. There's a quiet satisfaction in discovery. Tommy found a plat from 1958 with a thin blue line labeled Community Access Easement. The ink faded, but the stamp fresh with county authority. Ellie found an old deed on microfilm, not glamorous, just a small rubber stamp that said, recorded, April 2nd, 1960. I sat at a kitchen table, turning those yellowed pages like they were treasure maps. I kept copies of everything, because paper doesn't lie when the people in the suits do. Of course, the HOA had a countermove. When you poke at someone's authority, they either blink or they double down. Marla doubled. She started a campaign of fines, $2 penalties that multiplied into letters, then into threats of liens. She held a community safety meeting and brought in a private security company that wore uniforms and walked like they owned the street. One night, they chained the gate at dawn, right as a fishing tournament rolled in with boats and kids and folding chairs. Families stared at the chain like it was a wall. Old men cursed and moved on, because what are you supposed to do when a private body claims power over a public shoreline? That was the midpoint, the moment everything could go one of 2 ways. We could cave, write a check, and bury the story under legal fees, or we could blow a flashlight on whatever they were hiding. We chose the flashlight. The build toward the climax had the steadiness of a drumbeat. We filed public records requests. We recorded HOA board meetings where someone muttered about controlling access to raise property values, and we collected statements from neighbors who'd been brushed off for decades. At one hearing, Marla stood with her arms folded and said, "We must preserve the character of our community." Tommy asked, quietly, "How does a padlock preserve character?" It's the kind of line that doesn't humiliate someone. It simply exposes the mismatch between claim and action. Then the night they tried to enforce the lock physically, that's Act 3, the cinematic confrontation. They chose a Saturday when the lake was full, families, dogs, coolers, the kind of day where memory gets layered on memory. The HOA hired 2 men in black uniforms, not police, but close enough to cause a double take. They walked the dock, snapped photos, and told a group of fishermen to leave. That's when I walked up. I felt every eye on me, and I felt the long, slow breath you take before saying the thing you've been holding for a year. "Sir," the taller man said, "this property is restricted. You need to move along." "This is my family's dock," I said, and I let the past sit in that sentence. The weddings, the wakes, the chorus of summers. I showed the older men a copy of the 1958 plat, the deed stamped in 1960, the recorded easement. The taller man's face didn't change, but the other ones did, and then another truck pulled up, and Marla stepped out like a queen set to deliver judgment. "You don't have the right to be here," she said, calm and practiced. "Madam," I said, "the county recorded an easement. The law is pretty clear." I could feel the sound of the crowd tightening, like the lake itself holding its breath. Marla tried to pull rank. "Our covenants allow us to restrict access for community safety." Ellie stepped forward and said, "Your covenant doesn't supersede a recorded easement." She didn't shout. She was precise, and when precision hits bluster, bluster loses its shape. That confrontation should have been a legal note, a citation, a later hearing, but instead Marla stepped across a line that turned this into theater. She ordered the men to cut the chains out. One of them raised a pry bar and swung. A woman screamed, a child cried. The pry bar snapped the lock with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet. When they stepped onto the dock, a dozen neighbors moved forward and stood with us. It was no longer me against them. It was a neighborhood recognizing its own history. The words exchanged then are worth remembering because they were sharp and honest and small. "You think you can take this?" Marla hissed. "We can remove what's illegal," I said, and I kept my voice flat. Tommy read a line from the recorded plat. Ellie recorded every second. Someone called the county and asked for an on-site inspector. Within an hour, not because we were theatrical, but because facts travel faster than fear, a county official arrived with a stamped copy and a badge. He read the same language we had read. Then he looked at Marla and said, "This easement is valid. You are interfering with recorded access." Her face did that thing where the practiced smile retracts like a curtain. The men in black uniforms didn't have much left once a county inspector spoke the law into the open. Their uniforms looked suddenly like costumes. When a county officer asked for IDs and the men refused, the real police were called. It was embarrassing, authoritative posturing collapsing into answerable paper. After the enforcement, the dock reopened not with a vindictive gloat, but with a slow, civil reclamation. People carried coolers back across the planks. They joked about who brought the best potato salad, and a kid at the end of the dock cannonballed in like nothing had changed except that it had. We all felt that, the relief that comes when a community reclaims what belongs to everyone. But this isn't a tidy fairy tale. The final scene is quieter, reflective. I walk the dock at sunset alone. The boards creak under my shoes, and I think about what almost happened, how easily a piece of paper with a seal could be ignored by someone craving control. I think about Marla and how power distorts, and I think about Ellie and Tommy and the way ordinary people can move mountains when they keep records and stand together. I think about the children who will never remember the argument, only the fact that the dock was theirs again. I don't want you to leave thinking I was hero or victim. I was stubborn and lucky and fed up, and that's a combination that makes trouble for both bullies and cowards. The truth is messy, eh? Marlo appealed. Lawyers wrote letters, and there were hearings that dragged on. Some neighbors still think we made a fuss. Others think we saved a piece of the town. The dock stands. The photo on my mantle fades a little more every year, and the lock, the ugly little thing, is gone. So here's where I leave it, and this is the thing I want you to chew on. Who gets to decide what a neighborhood becomes? Is it the people who show up to meetings, who keep records, and who argue for days? Or is it the person with the loudest voice and the sharpest suit? And when the law exists on paper, how important is it that people actually read it and enforce it? If you have something to say, if you've been gagged by rules, or if you've seen power used in small, cruel ways, leave it down below. Tell me what you'd do if someone put a padlock on the thing that holds your family's memories. Hit like if you want more stories like this, and share it if you think communities should remember their own histories. I'll keep the doc and the stories, you keep the conversation.